We want to welcome you to the one, the only Hog Talk podcast, live from the Amigo Provision Studios. And we are part of the Believe and Buzz Radio networks, where you can hear us on all podcast platforms, as well as Buzz to 106.7 in Central Arkansas. So please like, rate, and review our podcast. And all live shows are presented by Arkansas Brewing Company in Ozark, Arkansas, as well as Bet Online, which remains your number one source for all things betting this season. Everything from NBA, MLB, and college basketball. You'll always find the latest odds, team matchup info, player news, and game trends at Bet Online, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite leagues and events. Head on over to betonline.ag to join and receive your 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Make sure to use our promo code BLEAV to receive your rewards. Bet Online, where the game starts. And tonight, Jacob is out on vacation. Hope he is enjoying everything. So I bring in my man, Ethan Westerman, from the Arkansas Democrat Gazette and Whole Hog Sports, where he is a freelancer for both. So, Ethan, we had a great time in Greenville covering the women's SEC women's tournament and softball and stuff, but bringing you in tonight to talk about the amazing weekend that Arkansas has had in basketball and baseball. I know you're sitting there at Panera right now, but I appreciate you joining the show tonight.
Yeah, happy to do it. Did have a good time out in Greenville. I think that we, aside from South Carolina, our little two-man crew might have been the most represented SEC team out there. No, I don't think there's any other school that had two people out there covering it, so happy to do it.
No joke. Yeah, and it was fun. I mean, especially with having family there and, being able to take my son on a road trip and just having a blast. I mean, I was wore out. I got home Sunday afternoon at like 4 and then had to go back to work the very next day and then work all the way through till Saturday. Worked one day, had one day off and then did it all again on Sunday. So I'm finally recovering from it. But I tell you what, the weekend that the basketball team had, and we knew going into the Illinois game that Arkansas was going to have to bang. They were going to have to play physical to beat that Illinois team. And, I mean, they just really pretty much imposed their will on that game in 73-63. And I really want to mention both games because I want to ask you a question, first of all. Do you think that Anthony Black and Nick Smith Jr. coming into the tournament, having the performances they've had, would you have bet any amount of money that they'd be in the Sweet 16 right now?
I spent a couple years in college as a student manager with the men's team, and so I got to work under Musselman's staff for a little over a year. And I would never bet against, with as much prep time as they got to have, I just don't bet against the team in any sort of postseason environment, because I just, from that experience, know that team, the way that the staff and the players all prepare for your opponent, like, I just knew there's no other team that's getting this prepared. Like, I felt every game that we went into, we were as prepared as we could be. Just the scouting reports are so in depth. So, I mean, I'd be lying if I said I thought that this team would make the Sweet 16. Just with it just had a different feel from some of these recent years whenever they made those runs, and they're just coming on so strong at the end of the regular season. But I mean, I had an idea that they could figure it out come tournament time. What was really big to me was that Illinois game. You started getting hints of flashbacks early in the second half whenever they started to – I think they got it within like 6 or something. There's just so many games this year that team has lost a lead in the second half. But then the way that they responded then and closed out that game strong, you could just kind of get you kind of got the sense this team has maybe learned from some things that they've gone through this year. So I really kind of started to think in that Illinois game that, oh man, they're about to blow another lead. But then the way that they responded, and especially in that game, Anthony Black, just kind of the way that he led the team through that stretch, I kind of got the sense that they're turning a little bit of the corner.
And of course, the biggest thing we could talk about it besides Devo, and we'll get into that in a second, but 17 for 26 in the free throws against Illinois, and then 21 for 26 against Kansas. We knew coming into the NCAA tournament, look, they're shooting, their 3-point percentage is still 3 for 15. We knew that you're either going to have to make threes or you're going to have to make your free throws, because they're going to either foul you down the stretch, try to do the 3-for-2 game that everybody always tries to play, where that last 2 minutes of a NCAA basketball game between commercials, timeouts, and fouls seems to always last 15 minutes. And I know that Danielle, for the game against Kansas, that 15 minutes must have felt like 30, just with how everything ended. But I'm really happy to see, Council, and there was a time where he was kind of questioned. Is he calling out the coach? Is he doing this? Is he being, but he was speaking up. He was trying to assert himself as a leader. And to score 21 points against Kansas, 10-11 from the free throw line, that's what we said coming in here. If Nick Smith Jr. is not on his game, somebody's going to step up. And the way Council and Davis have stepped up, like the comment section said, we need to start calling Devo Mr. March. I believe it.
Yeah, and what really stood out to me in that Kansas game is they went Kansas went 18 for 25 from the foul line, which really isn't a terrible percentage, but the timing, they were missing so many free throws down the final stretch whenever Ricky was going to the line and making some big shots. Just kind of the contrast there. It's like the team started to it feels like so many times this year it's been the other way around, that the other team can't miss a free throw down the stretch, and then Arkansas is missing the crucial ones. But I mean, come tournament time, anybody knows this who fills out a bracket and is rooting for your team. The most frustrating thing in the world is whenever your team gets some opportunities from the line and they can't hit, and it really will make or break you in the postseason. And then of course what Devo did down the stretch of that game was just he just took it into his own hands. I feel like a lot of times this year, people have been, waiting for. In the past, you've had that JD Note who can make a play out of nothing. Just it's breaking down. He can make some shots, and you're just like, who is that on this team? And there's been signs this year that it could be maybe a Devo or somebody, but he took over, just making things happen so many times in that game. So yeah, they made some really big shots. They were hitting their free throws. It just seems like they're starting to kind of, they've got an identity that they're starting to get at, which is I think that they're a team that's just defensively. We've known all year they're pretty good defensively, but they're really starting to just look more cohesive as a unit, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we knew Devo was going to be that leader. He's always been that mental leader, really. And I tell you what, his post-game speech where he just left it all on the court and got so emotional, and everybody's seen it and went viral. Just how much emotions, and him being from Arkansas and then having to, step away from the team for a short, brief moment, just with everything was going on. And I'll say it, the critics and the people that were doubting him, the times that were saying, and he turns the ball over too much. He doesn't need to be on the floor. They need to be starting him. And for him to put it all out there. And that's what these kids have to deal with on a daily basis. And they see the comments. They see everything that's going on social media. It's hard not to. But for him to come through, put this team on his back along with Council, and get them to Vegas where they're going to be playing UConn. And it went. There's about 56 seconds left in the game, but it's 70-53. So you're going to be facing the 4-seed UConn in Vegas, barring a 17-point miracle in a minute. But they're going to be a tough out in Vegas. But when it comes to this point in time, like you said, and you spent time with the team, this is the right time to get hot. And they seem, like Devo said, they got it figured out. They were struggling, got it figured out, and they feel like they're ready for the run.
Yeah, no. And Diva's actually one of those players. He was one of the last. He's the last one remaining on the team that I kind of worked with. Got to know him as a freshman, and he's cared all along. He's he's a player that's in the gym at. I mean, he's there in the morning before a lot of people have woken up. Just to be clear, he cares a lot, and I think that you just saw down the stretch that coming out, like especially, I mean, in the post game. If you couldn't tell from the game itself, then just watch that post game interview. He, as a kid from Arkansas, just understands how big of a moment that was to. That he just brought a lot of joy to a lot of people across the whole state. Him being a kid from Jacksonville, and he's a really good guy too. And you know, like you said, this team this year has struggled with a lot. They've struggled with just a lot of outside noises, which I mean, in today's just landscape of college athletics, it's hard to not deal with that. I feel like every team is just increasingly. It's like you do one thing right, it feels like people are telling you did 3 things wrong. And
Yeah.
just for kind of what all he's dealt with this year, having to sit out for a little bit, and just it seems like, I mean, I don't want to speculate with why, but I mean, it felt like probably just mentally needed some time away from things. Just to have that moment and being an in-state kid, huge for him. But yeah, he was with the teams that I worked with. He was one of the most special guys I got to work with as a human, like not just as a player. I mean, you could tell he had the talent there even before I ever watched him play his first game in a Razorback uniform. But just as a guy, he was very he just really has a lot of emotional intelligence. I feel like, as far as he was always looking out for the people on the team that didn't really have doing roles that we don't really have much of a say in things. He just took care of people who took care of him. Just always trying to go the extra mile, at least for me as a manager. There's in today's age of college athletics, you have some people who are the other way around that just, it's like, oh, just do all this stuff for me. That's like your job, which I mean, it is, but he was one that all along would, like, it's small things like walking over to grab something from you instead of making you walk the whole way. He did the little things that, to the people who do those type of jobs, it means a lot to you because that they're trying to take care of you.
They appreciate you. They see you as somebody out there helping them out, as opposed to, and some of the divas and stuff like that feel like you're there to just hand them the water bottle or hand them a towel or go get them stuff. I totally get it.
Or just even like I would go rebound for him, like kind of crazy hours of the day sometimes. So I only spent a little bit of time with him, but really for a lot of players, some of the ones that come to mind that were kind of like him were like your Isaiah Joe. He was just a great, great person too. Just the ones that take time to thank people who are inconveniencing themselves to help them. And Diva was one of those guys. So it didn't surprise me at all to see, all the emotion come out of him. Just knowing kind of who he is as a person, and then knowing how much it means to him being from the state, of course. I mean, he grew up, I'm just trying to think, in his lifetime, I'm not sure how many Sweet 16s he ever got to watch the Razorbacks play in.
I don't know. I mean, if it was 95, 96 since they'd been to, or 94, 95. They won it 93, 94, got there in 94, 95, and then after that there was no Sweet 16s.
No Sweet. So, and he's now been a part of he's been not only a part of the past 3, he's made some of the biggest moments.
As a freshman, he made big moments.
He made that shot against Oral Roberts.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so for him, I mean, it's just, he's one of you love to see the kids that come from in-state get that moment. And he's certainly, I mean, there's been some great ones that have played in the past decade. You think of, your Bobby Portis and your Daryl Make and some others that were in state. While those maybe arguably were the more, talented players, he's had the bigger moments on a bigger stage. He's made some plays that, I think, at least personally, his legacy's kind of cemented. He's one of the players that brought the program back to places it had not been in, northwards of 20 years.
And talking about being in with the team and being around the players, you mentioned something about the in-state kids. I mean, what did you notice, like in practice, just from a day-to-day basis, when them kids from Arkansas put on that Razorback practice jersey or they put that Razorback basketball jersey on the game, what do you think, set them apart from just how much it meant to them to play for Arkansas? Because we're in a unique situation where Arkansas is all these kids have ever watched. They might be some kind of form of when it comes to NBA or pro, they like a player more so than a team. So, and that's rare when you talk about basketball compared to football or basketball or baseball, but that's just the way it is. But what did you notice about the in-state kids day-to-day basis that you felt like they wanted it more, or they felt like they had to prove more?
Yeah. I don't know really how else to frame it other than they just got it. They understood how significant it was to be in the position they were. Because I think for a lot of them, they spent, like you said, the whole market and the whole state is just, the Razorbacks. So they just understood for a long time, like looking up to those people that played for the Razorbacks. And don't get me wrong, these out-of-state kids learn it pretty quick how unique of a situation is. But I think for those in-state ones, like, your Isaiah Joe, your Jalen Williams, your players like that, your Moses Moody, they understand kind of how starving the fan base was. And the state has produced for the size of Arkansas, the amount of basketball talent that comes from here. I think we just have to give credit, number one, to a lot of the high school coaches around the state and a lot of the programs around the state. Arkansas produces, for the size of it, incredible basketball talent, at least recently. Historically, I think it has as well. But just in the past few years, it's kind of been, it's been great for Musselman just recruiting in state. You're getting some players that some blue bloods are wanting around the country. And so I think for those kids, there's your Isaiah Joe, who he was very much under valued coming out of high school. I think he was a 3-star. And I think that how much he cared kind of separated him early. Just these in-state kids, they care and they get it. And they are, like I said, they just get how much the fan base was starving for 3 straight Sweet 16s. So, yeah.
And also, Jalen Williams, you look at what he did. You're talking about the Charge King, making a name for himself. And that's the thing. When you get to the league, you got to find a way to separate yourself. What makes you different than all the other guys that are coming into the draft or coming on this team? And he's doing the same thing at Oklahoma City that he was doing at Arkansas. And he's in the starting lineup a lot. So, that's another one from the, we're talking about Northside, Fort Smith Northside, that they're starting to produce Razorback players left and right, and now they're getting pros. So it's really good to see what, you talk about people being rewarded. Guys like Jalen Williams, who is not afraid to take that charge and to get things done that most don't. He's doing it in the NBA now.
Yeah, and like I said, it starts with the high school coaches. I actually got to write a feature not long ago for our Hogs Illustrated magazine on Isaiah and Jalen coming from Northside, and I got a chance to talk with Coach Eric Burnett down there. And just, it all starts with, the culture that a lot of these high school coaches are instilling in their programs. For somebody to come in and their identity to be taking charges, that is like an effort and a heart thing. There's not a lot of people in the NBA. On the night that LeBron James set the all-time scoring record, 6 points before he did, Jalen Williams took a charge to upset a lot of people because they wanted to see LeBron set that record. But Jalen Williams said, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to take a charge on this massive freight train running through here. I saw Isaiah last year. I actually got a chance to go up to Philadelphia and watch them play the Lakers, and I saw him take a charge on Anthony Davis. Yeah. It's just, I think that a lot of these kids from in-state, they play with a lot of heart, and I think it comes from a lot of these coaches. I think that Arkansas has a chip on its shoulder. Just a lot of these in-state kids about, I know for Isaiah, he was under-recruited and everything, but even your Jalen Williams, people knew he was good coming out of high school, but I think I don't think anybody would have said I see him starting for the Oklahoma City Thunder here in a couple of years.
Exactly.
I think a lot of these kids play with a lot of heart, and that comes from their families, their parents, and then their high school coaches. And, of course, them coming through Arkansas system. That's all stuff that's instilled in Musselman system. I think the three pillars are energy, enthusiasm, and I'm missing one of the other E's. But
Well, I mean, could you
effort.
imagine LeBron is going up for his layup to break Kareem's record? There's Jalen Williams. Everybody's got their phones out. It goes in, and the ref calls a charge. I mean, that would be one of the craziest things. And you talking about being, going viral, being the one that took the charge to keep him from breaking Kareem's record. That would have been the craziest thing in the world.
Yeah, he got the record there later in the game, but then Isaiah Joe led it. I mean, people just saw the clip of them, getting that LeBron setting the record and the game pausing with 15 seconds, whatever. I've never seen anything like that where they just pause the game. But the people that didn't watch the rest of the game missed Isaiah Joe leading them to a win. He led them in scoring, I believe. At least he led them second half scoring. He hit a lot of threes that game. It's just these. It's really cool to see these kids from in-state now having that moment. I think for a while there we kind of missed. It just didn't seem like that was happening as frequently as it had in the past. And it's like now all of a sudden Arkansas is producing in-state kids who play for their in-state school and then go on to do cool things in the NBA. I know Daniel Gafford's I think he's in the starting lineup for the Wizards still. You've got Moses Moody playing for the Warriors. You've got Jalen and Isaiah playing down the road from their high school over at Oklahoma City. There's just more in-state kids who went. They didn't go to you don't have your Malik Monks right now who went to Kentucky and then made their way to the league. You have a lot of these kids recently they're staying in state, they're playing for the home team, and they're having success in the NBA, which is just really cool to see. I think that it's meant a lot to probably a lot of Razorback fans to see them pick their home state school and then have the success.
Well, how much do you think you attribute that to Musselman and his tenure at every level? The G League, NBA, overseas, international. What do you think he can really, or what not really, but what he's been able to do because the gap between high school and college. What has been the biggest thing that you've seen when it comes to closing that gap in between? You're a great college player, and we're going to make you an NBA starter.
Yeah, I think he's, at least from my experience, was just really good at identifying roles that players can be really good at. Not asking you to be good at everything. If you can be really good at taking charges like Jalen, or if you can really make the three ball like Isaiah, or just really, really highlighting that. If you find that one thing, the value you can add to a team, that translates to the NBA. I mean, there's so many great college players who don't translate to the NBA because they don't have that that thing that sets them apart. You can't have five, just go-to scorers on a team, but you can have your guy who, like Jalen, who grabs you a ton of rebounds, takes charges, and plays with a ton of energy. So I think, like I said, those kind of pillars that come from Musselman's system, the energy, effort, enthusiasm, I believe I have my E's right. I need to check that. I think those are the three E's. If there's one I'm missing, shame on me. But...
And one last thing, when we're talking about Musselman, and you said that, how they prep. And we've kind of seen glimpses of, the papers on the wall that just depict every player and their tendencies. It almost looks like a 2K, like their attributes. If you want to go through there in their AI and you want to put their 3-point shooting at 45 and this, and they have symbols beside. I mean, just when you're seeing that in person, how in depth and now you look at, they're getting to prepare for UConn for basically a week. What kind of, when you're talking about advantage, does that give Musselman when you're preparing a team like UConn?
Yeah, I honestly think it benefits the team more in that second game of the weekend, like how you saw against Kansas. Whenever both teams are under a short turnaround, whenever there's a week of preparation. I think you've seen in the past, Arkansas's first games of the tournament. I guess it was Colgate was pretty close at one point. Vermont was pretty close, and Illinois. I think they just played a pretty poor game too. Illinois did. They weren't finishing stuff, but it was still close. I think that really that advantage comes out in those whenever both teams haven't had a whole week of preparation. You saw the turnaround against Kansas, and the second half adjustments that were made were it was just a work of art. I think that I think that they really thrive with all the preparation time you get, but it's more of an even playing field whenever you get a whole week. But it's one of those things now where I look around the bracket and I see that, you get to the point of the tournament where you're like, well, one of these teams is going to win a national championship. And you're like, naming, you're like, Princeton, Alabama. You're like, one of these teams will win a championship. And it's kind of gotten to the point where you're like, with Arkansas, you're like, why not Arkansas from this side of the bracket? Like, I mean, it's not like I think you've got Texas on that side still. You've got a few teams that have had really great seasons, but you just saw that they can, under a short turnaround and with preparation time, they can come up with a game plan. They're not going to – I don't think the team's going to be out-athleticized, if that's a word, like they have the athleticism of almost any team in the bracket still. So it's like with that prep time and with the team starting to gel together, I really don't – you get to the point of the bracket where you're like, well, if it's not Arkansas, it's going to be one of them. Why not Arkansas?
Exactly. Well, and you brought up a great point. When you draw that 8-9 game, you're having to prep for that team. You're not you always have the upsets, but you're not going into this knowing, all right, we got the better hand. If we just stick to our plan, we're going to win. Don't overlook them, but if we stick to our plan, we're going to win. You really had a 50-50. I said it was a 50-50 game to me, just because how similar Arkansas and Illinois was. I said they would win. And then going into the Kansas game, just how everything matched up. And then, of course, the news of Bill Self coaching. We're coming into a similar situation where, I think this is going to be the biggest advantage when it comes to Arkansas when you're playing, UConn. This is, you got one guard, Jordan Hawkins, who's averaging 16 a game, but your other two scorers are inside guys. They're forwards. I think that bodes well. You don't have 2-3 guards that are scoring 12 and 13, 14, 15 points a game. That's been a kind of a struggle when you're talking about shutting down guards, but they do average, 9 threes a game. So that's going to be one of the tough things to really slow them down. But they are shooting 75% from the free throw line. There's another, just how Arkansas has been shooting from the free throw line. That's really going to help them out.
Yeah. And I think what really impresses me a lot about the last game, the Arkansas played just against Kansas, that was one of those games that opening it up. I mean, you watch the first few minutes, you're like, man, this Kansas team is good. They're moving the ball. They're making plays. They're making some insane, just like knocking down 3-pointers that they have no business making late in the shot clock. I think they made one from like midway between the 3-point and half court. And the team responded still. And that's what impressed me most, I think, is just Kansas looked good and Arkansas didn't shut down. I just think that we're reaching a point in the postseason where the team has confidence. They aren't going to give up. I don't think in any loss this year I've seen the team. Maybe the Vanderbilt game on the road, it seemed like just the team that got all in their head. But a lot of these losses they've had, it's been second half leads surrendered, and or like the game at Alabama, they gave up the second half lead, but then they had a chance at the end still. I just think the team right now it's gone through a lot of those tough moments, and they're starting to have confidence that they might not have had earlier, and they're getting it at the right time. I think Musselman said it on TV after the game. There's not a lot of teams in the country getting better right now.
Exactly.
And he feels like his team is getting better, which that's with the amount of preparation that team and the staff has going into games, and with the team improving at the same time, I would have trouble betting against them right now in games, which is kind of crazy. I wouldn't have thought I would have said that, like a month or so ago. Whenever it just kind of, there were moments where it looked like they were just a loss away from maybe things going really south. There were some must-win games in the regular season. You couldn't drop any of those home games against, Georgia, Florida. You needed those wins. Any of those had gone the other way. I mean, I didn't know at that time this team had Sweet 16 in them, but here they are.
Well, yeah, and that's what me and Jacob were talking about. The more of those games that you drop, you knew the last 3 games that were going to be very crucial when it comes to winning those final 3 games of the season. And so when they would drop games, and you're like, okay, we know they need to win these in order to get to 500, but that window kept on getting wider and wider open when it come to the way they finished. It was hard. Like I said, yeah, it would have been hard to predict this team to be, in the Sweet 16. And again, Nick Smith Jr. scoring 6 points against Illinois, and then having we pull it right back up. He had 6 against Kansas, or I think I pulled up the same game twice, but he had 6 points against Illinois, and I can't remember how many points he had against Kansas. But you're playing like this, and your top scorer is playing the way he's been playing. So
and that's when you got to – I'm looking at a player like Jordan Walsh, who in yesterday's game, he had a plus-minus of 12, and I think the next closest player was like 4 or something. You have other players who are stepping up in moments that – I mean, on that last little free throw, I think the miss that Arkansas had, I forgot who was at the line. It might have been Council, but that was Walsh who got in there and tipped that thing around and got Arkansas.
Exactly.
You have players that are making plays right now to overcome some of the – it's like finally you're seeing, one man not having a great game and the rest of the team kind of starting to pick them up just with, plays like that. I think that Arkansas right now is as dangerous as anybody in the field. Just if Nick Smith starts scoring too, adding on top of this, you're just like, man, the team is playing really good defense. The offense looks a lot better. So yeah, they've got a lot of people picking up right now and making those plays that are winning plays. Kind of me and you were on the women's side all the time. They're making Riley's, as the coach Neighbors calls them.
Exactly.
Got a lot of players putting their bodies out there. Kamani's made some huge plays here in the tournament, which he's a player who we didn't even see on the court for a lot of the. You have a team seated lower in their conference tournament than they were in the NCAA tournament right now in the Sweet 16. That just, I think, goes to show the SEC was really tough, and kind of some of those bumps and bruises are boding well for the team right now.
Well, and that's what happens when you make 2 previous Elite Eights. I mean, you get that benefit of the doubt. They know what type of team Musselman can bring to a tournament. So, but we're going to hit a break right quick. After our commercial break, we will come back and we'll elaborate on the UConn matchup a little bit more, and we'll end it with some baseball talk as Arkansas gets their SEC sweep over Auburn, and we'll talk about a couple of moonshots as well.
At Fordham Lee Distillery, our bourbons look as amazing as they taste. A delicious, high rye bourbon aged over 6 years. Fordham Lee is a company founded on the principles of great folks and spirits worth remembering. Look for Fordham Lee brands at Walk-Ons, Liquor World, Buster's, and soon everywhere in Northwest Arkansas that serves fine spirits. Fordham Lee Bourbon says please drink responsibly. 21 means 21. Fordham Lee Distillery, blended and bottled in Middletown, Maryland.
Shelby Taylor Trucking serves all your timberland needs in South Central Arkansas. With over 50 years in the industry, Shelby Taylor Trucking has established themselves as trustworthy leaders in the industry. From planting to harvesting to hauling your timber, Shelby Taylor Trucking is ready to serve you. Follow them on all social media platforms at Shelby Taylor Trucking. Learn more by visiting their website at staylortrucking.com. That's staylortrucking.com.
McCoy Tiger Drug Store of Sheridan, Arkansas has been the top pharmacy in all of South Central Arkansas since 1895. They were also the 2020 Good Neighbor Pharmacy of the Year. They not only fix you up with your prescription with timely and friendly service, but also an elite gift shop. All your OTC needs, baby and wedding registries, tuxedo rentals, and much more. They're located at 821 North Rock Street in Sheridan. Give them a call today at 870-942-5121.
And we want to welcome back to the Hog Talk podcast. And we want to mention our main sponsor, Arkansas Brewing Company at 201 South First Street in Ozark, Arkansas. You can catch them from Wednesdays to Sundays, and they are at 479-667-2739. A lot of great food, always having some bands, karaoke nights, lunch specials. So head on down to downtown Ozark, Arkansas. Go see Destiny and Chris Brockett there and get you a nice drink, nice meal, and meet some new friends. And as well as Amigo Provision Company, they come out with their collegiate camo line, and they have a lot of cool Arkansas camo stuff with the Razorback blended in with the camo. A lot of cool hats, shirts. They even got some cool coolers, like your Yeti coolers that you can go. So go to Amigo Provisions website and put in the Hog Talk code, get you a little discount, and we'll be back on the show, Ethan. So again, I mean, and this is no disrespect to Illinois, but when you're looking at this bracket and you're looking at this run that Arkansas could potentially go on, you beat Kansas. Now you're up against UConn. I mean, talk about, when you're looking at the Blue Bloods, just how difficult, when you're talking about this run, how difficult it could be.
Yeah, well, the good news is you did get past Kansas, and if you can get past that hurdle, the number one seed in your region, no longer, you worry a little bit about like, oh, is the team, they're going up against the number one seed. Is that going to get to their head? You've already knocked off one of the top teams seeded in your region who's had a great year. So the rest of the field, you look at it and you're not looking at anybody saying we can't beat them. So,
Exactly.
there might be some matchup problems down the road. But like I said, this team has the athleticism and I think the heart right now too to overcome some matchup problems. I do want to point out, I was thinking about it after we got done talking about Diva a little bit earlier. You saw him foul out with, I don't know how much time was left, 2 minutes. And, that's a time whenever he could have just shut down and been so disappointed. But he was over there on the bench, just absolutely fired up, like coaching the team from the bench, and saw his teammates finish off what kind of he got started there. I think the team right now has the heart and the confidence to where, they aren't going to look at a team on it. Well, knowing Musselman, like there's not a team already entering it. They're going to look in the bracket and not expect to win. They expect to win every game they're in. But I think right now, especially after getting that monkey off your back and beating a team, that's the first team this year, I think, that you walked into the game saying this team is way higher ranked. And the team actually finished it off and got a win, like a big win. So I think right now, just the confidence and the morale of the team, they aren't going to be looking at any team in their region saying we can't beat them or this. I just think that was such a huge game for the team.
Yeah, and you look at on the other side of the bracket, you got TCU playing Gonzaga, and then UCLA beat Northwestern. And they barely got by them by 5. I watched a little bit of that the UCLA Northwestern game, and as a 2 seed, the guard play didn't really impress me as much as what we see out of Arkansas. And of course we know where you get with Gonzaga and Timmy and being able to, knock them off. So but that's what happens when you see these upsets happen. It's been pretty much chalk, other than Arkansas, they're upset over Kansas. This region's kind of been chalk.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that this region's been chalk in a tournament that's been anything but that. So it is one of those deals where you kind of wished, Arkansas would maybe be one of those regions with some of these. I'm not trying to discredit what Princeton and Fairleigh Dickinson have done so far, but
amazing.
if you're over there as Tennessee in that region, you're just kind of licking your chops that you've been seeing this happen.
Well, and you don't sleep on Kansas State. I had them. Yeah. I've got them in my Final Four. I don't know where my bracket stands. I pretty much, like everybody else, threw it away. But, with Desi Steele at Kansas State, he's the third leading scorer on the team, I believe. But that's one of those teams you can't sleep on Kansas State. So that's going to be a tough matchup. And then when you look at the top half of the bracket, you got Houston. Houston and Alabama are the only 1 seeds left. So you got Princeton, and they'll take on the winner of Creighton and Baylor. Alabama will take on San Diego State. I think that's going to be an excellent matchup. I think, when Arkansas played them in Maui, and so we know about that team.
You're getting down to a part of the bracket where you look at all the teams that are left in, and it's a ton of teams that the Razorbacks have played. You've got Alabama, San Diego State. You've got Creighton and Baylor that are playing tonight, 2 teams Arkansas played. Tennessee's still left in there. Obviously, Kentucky was knocked out earlier. But, point being, Arkansas's played a lot of these teams, and you're kind of seeing that maybe a lot of these, the regular season record that disappointed some folks, it's not like they were losing to – and they beat San Diego State, so that wasn't even a loss. But they were playing some really good competition all year long. we're just kind of seeing, I think the Big 12 and the SEC are kind of rising to the top in this tournament. You've got your teams like, your Michigan State's having a good run right now. And then, of course, your UConn. But, like, across the board, it seems like the SEC and the Big 12 have had good showings, even with the Kansas loss. I genuinely think the way that Kansas played, there's not a lot of teams that would have beat them yesterday. With some of the shots they were making, I think that those two conferences are kind of separating themselves right now as far as maybe a little bit people were sleeping on them.
And then the fact you got here next year, 24-25 with Texas and OU coming, it's only going to get even deeper when it comes to the SEC. And that's another one of those caveats of just how in every sport it's going to be very tough. And we look at and this is surprising, you got Creighton up 15 on Baylor, 65-50 with 9:20 left in the second half. So I mean that's incredible.
Yeah, I think that they dealt with the injury bug a little bit after they beat Arkansas. I forgot who got injured for them. Might have been the big guy, Kalkbrenner. But I know they had the injury bug and took their little, their bumps along the way. But down the stretch of the season, that's a team. It's always you want to look at how teams are doing right before they enter the postseason. And that's a team that I'm like, man, they've got all the pieces as well. Whenever Arkansas and them played in Maui earlier this year, I remember thinking, watching that game, this feels like an Elite Eight Final Four. Both teams are really making plays.
And I wanted to ask you about that. Basketball has the luxury of playing these marquee games in November, and I know it gives you a little bit of seasoning on your team, playing these marquee matchups. But do you think there is as big as an advantage of playing those games early in the season? Because one, I mean, you're playing them in November, then you don't play them again, those type of games, until late February and March. But your team is going to be totally different. Is it something that we've just put a lot of emphasis in, or does it hold a lot of merit when it comes to playing these tough games early in the year makes you stronger in March?
I think it's high risk, high reward type of deal. I think we saw on the women's side of the SEC this year. I know me and you follow that so closely. A lot of these SEC teams played some opponents and got beat in those games. And down the stretch, whenever the committee was making its decisions, the SEC got it absolutely passed up on because of it. I think that for Arkansas, it got some wins in those games. I think the experience, no matter what, is good for you. Getting close games out of the way early pays off at the end of the year, I think. But I do think with the whole landscape of the committee and how much what they value with teams, that it's high risk. By the way, softball just closed off a win over Alabama.
I was about to break it out. Yeah,
I had to break it out. Shanice Delce escaped a bases loaded, no outs, and got the win.
No outs, bases loaded, and beat out. And talk about it. And we usually break that down on Tuesdays, which with the game tomorrow against Stephen F. Austin, we will have our weekly women's sports report on Tuesday. But just the way things were going for Arkansas, having that slump of losing due, you lost to UCA, you dropped the series to Texas A&M, you get run ruled by Texas A&M, then you get run ruled by Wichita. You lose a close one last night against Alabama. So for them to come back and, you're playing tomorrow for the series, that's huge for this team. And we'll break that more down. We'll know more about that. And of course, Arkansas's game tomorrow night in Bud Walton Arena, we will be there at 7:00 against Stephen F. Austin. We'll break all that down on Tuesday. But yeah, I'm very proud of this team. And I'll tell you what, we were in the press conference with Coach Deifel. She always defends that team no matter what. We're good. We're good. We're good. And again, you're setting yourself back a couple of years because this team hasn't faced that kind of adversity. And we're like, hey, what's going on? What's going on?
And I was about to bring this back around to basketball a little bit. I think that they're going through a little bit with all the youthfulness on this team and just the new faces, what basketball goes through a lot of the times where you hit that stretch where, from the outside, people are like, this is really bad. But, the team's just – you're going to take losses of playing in the SEC. And these freshmen made huge plays today. So I know you'll get more into that on Tuesday. But
yeah, and that goes to the basketball team. You think about you had one – returning starter, in Devo. One guy. And then you're replacing your whole team with transfer guys and freshmen. Then you lose Brazil. Then you lose Nick Smith Jr. for them to even be in this position, and this is not making any excuses, because I've seen a couple of people in the fourth quarter, and when I see stuff like this, it's almost like they're not hoping, but they're predicting them to lose. They're like, well, either way, however this game goes, out of them. I think that's leaving doubt. Like, you're kind of doubting that you're kind of leaving yourself open of, well, I didn't predict them to win, but I didn't predict them to lose. And I just think that's a lazy thing to say when you're in the moment and you're in the game. How they've been playing, you're like, well, it's been a fun ride either way. Like, have some faith in your team. And this is what's happened. We've told, like I said, it's taken us till mid-January with some veteran teams to gel. Then you throw in 11 new guys. You lose your top two scorers. You get yours back 4 or 5 games left in the season, and you expect everything just to click mid-January. That's not how it is. And that's now we're seeing in March this team peaking.
Yeah, and I think I always like to look back on a season whenever you see a team that kind of turned things around and look at, like, what was a moment that might have, like, kind of just started changing the momentum of this season. I know the team took some losses down the stretch, but, like, let's be real. Those losses were to Alabama, Tennessee, and Kentucky. Like, it's not a walk in the park against either of those teams, and 2 of them are on the road. But I think that they were figuring things out well before that. In a game that I look back on and I say that might have been a moment the team, like, finally started to get its swagger back a little bit. They had a home game against LSU on a night where it was snowy in Fayetteville.
Yes.
And they had lost a lot of games. I think they were like 1-5 in league or something. And you had the Bud Walton, I think, missing maybe 3,000 people. You still had the fan base behind you. And I think that game was a big game for the team, seeing that they hadn't lost fan support. And then it just seemed like kind of from that game on, it was a little bit different of a team. Devo started to play out. That was kind of whenever Devo started to play a bigger role in the offense, at least, starting with that game. So I think the team me and you, I like to compare things to the women's side because we watch it so much. I think the women's team, the difference in the men's and the women's this year is the women I think both teams are actually peaking right now. Like, watching the women play, they are playing with a lot more confidence than they've played in a long time. I know that
it's
people
just hard
know
to it because the level of talent. I mean, and seeing, but I will say this, that just shows, and everybody listening, that just shows you just how good South Carolina is, because I'm telling you right now, Arkansas is very tough, but that team, when you can just turn around and score baskets, when you've got Aaliyah Boston scoring 16 and 12 rebounds, and she's sitting down halfway through the third quarter, because their 8, 9, and 10 players could start for every team in the SEC.
I don't know another 25-point game I've ever seen team, and I've walked away saying, like, oh man, they're peaking. I was like, they're playing with a lot of confidence. They're playing well. But the parallel I was getting between the men and the women is I think the men won some of those games that they needed to win down the stretch of the regular season to get in the tournament. You think of those home games against Florida, and there were some more along the way down there at the stretch that's like, okay, this is a tournament team. Like, the women, I think that they just started peaking a little bit too late. Because you go to those games against Georgia and Mississippi State on the road that were huge for them, because those are two teams
Georgia
that just
game was a devastating loss. I mean, because that's the thing. If you look at the Vanderbilt loss, I mean, that was a close loss. But that Georgia getting drubbed the way they did, and just almost like you're giving up in a sense, because when you get beat, I think it was 70-48 or something like that along the line. It's hard to say, well, they didn't give up, but I mean, they just let the game get away from them. It's hard as a committee member when you have a 4-game losing streak and then 3-game losing streak in the same season, and then you're having losses like LSU, South Carolina, Tennessee, and then Georgia to get them in the tournament. So, I mean,
and I think it didn't work to the women's favor, kind of how the committee viewed the SEC at large, because you're seeing now in these tournaments, Mississippi State almost beat Notre Dame and Georgia almost beat Iowa after both teams upset teams in the first round. Like, the SEC was good this year. And so those were losses that to the committee at the time, I think they're looking at those, they're saying, like, oh, you just lost to another bubble team. But truth be told, they lost to a top 30 team in the country. But they just had to win one of those games. This is one of those years that you truly look at it and you say this team was missing one more win probably to make the tournament.
Exactly.
And the men got those wins. The men, they stepped up in some of those games to where there's sometimes in your league that you cannot get the big win per se. Like, I mean, on the men's side, when you look at what was their best SEC win, I guess it was maybe Missouri at home in the regular season. Is there one I'm missing in there? Or Kentucky on the road. Those two were big, but like at the same time, it wasn't like a huge upset. Right? The women, sometimes you can get away with just taking care of business in your league and not necessarily getting the big wins, but kind of the way the committee viewed the women's side this year, they needed to get some upsets, and they dropped too many games that, you know, you couldn't drop the Vanderbilt. So kind of the difference I'm seeing on those sides is the men got some of those wins, the women didn't, because I mean they had very similar records in league and overall, but just kind of the way the committee viewed the conferences. SEC was viewed a lot better on the men's side than the women's, and rightfully so from the non-conference the women had. In the league, I think Arkansas and South Carolina were the only ones to get any top 25 wins. But, I mean, you're seeing now the SEC was a lot stronger in both sides than probably the committee thought. So,
I think the SEC is just dominant in all sports. And I think that the NCAA and other conferences are tired of it. Just look at Georgia and football, Alabama and football. Then you look at Alabama and basketball, Arkansas and basketball, Arkansas and baseball, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. I mean, it seems like almost every major look at the big three sports. The SEC's the dominant team and they don't win it every year, but they're in the talk every year. And I think that kind of rubs everybody the wrong way.
And I think that on the women's side of basketball this year, you look, I follow a lot of the national, poll voters and stuff. And that it was like almost like people were licking their chops to say, hey, the SEC women's is not good this year.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw it left and right, like, oh, this conference is over. Like, it's not good this year. And then postseason rolls around and teams are upsetting teams that they had ranked in the top 25 all year. So I think it's as strong as it's been. Maybe not as strong as it's been, but it's strong still. And it's one of those deals where I think that it did not benefit the women this year, just kind of how the SEC was viewed. But now that you're seeing in the postseason that they played a really tough schedule, and they probably deserve to be in the field whenever you look at some of these bubble teams that made it in over them, how they performed. So,
and moving on to a team that's never on the bubble, the Razorback baseball team sitting at 8-2 overall, 3-0 with the sweep over Auburn. They have not lost since February 26th against Eastern Illinois, when everybody was losing their mind because they finally dropped a game to Illinois. Well, they just continued to go on a 13-game win streak, and again, winning in a sweep fashion over Auburn, 7-2 on Friday. You won 9-3 on Saturday, and then you won 5-0 today. And I'll tell you what, there was a point in time, I don't know how much of the games you got to watch. I got to watch a little bit of yesterday's game, and Hosenbarger, I think that's his last name, he went to dive for a catch, made the catch, running into the wall, dove into the wall, and then the ball come out. And this could have been, this could have been huge for Auburn to really extend the lead. And for them to really come back and shut the door on Auburn in that game, and then you jump out to a 9-3 win. I think that just shows you don't have the Robert Moores. You don't have the big names like you did in the past. I think this team's going to be a team of grit. And you would talk about dude hit a 470-foot moonshot to Greenland today. I mean, it is insane how strong that guy is.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to watch them a ton. I've listened to Phil Elson on the radio some, and it feels like I'm watching it because he does such a good job calling those baseball games. But I mean, my sense of the team this year is they can really hit the ball. That's what I've got. I want to spend a lot more time watching them. I just haven't gotten to it. It seems like they went through some injuries on the pitching staff that a lot of people looked at and said this could be devastating for the team. But I mean, it seems like some guys have really stepped up. And Auburn is not a bad team at all. And to sweep them in your first SEC series. And another thing I want to point out is yesterday it was very, very cold yesterday. I mean, I think it was like mid-30s, maybe upper 30s in Fayetteville, and you had a packed stadium still. So I think that just what Dave Van Horn's been able to do with the program for years now, and just the kind of where the program's at, you have a team that I think is playing with a lot of a lot of confidence, and the fan base really rallies around him.
And then you got Jace Brofin and Jared Wagner. Between the two, they've hit 14 home runs and 50 RBIs, and we're 20 games into the season. I can't remember who it was that hit. I think it was Slavens that hit the home run yesterday. I mean, that thing went a mile. I put out a tweet. The thing went over to the Mexican restaurant across the highway because that thing went up and over the scoreboard and dropped. And then the one Wagner hit today, I mean, like I said, I don't know if we can look at the record books. I would love to see what the longest home run ever hit at Baum Walker was, but they said it was 470 feet.
I heard Phil on the call of that one, actually. I think the team was down like 2-0 or something, and it was like a go-ahead 3-run shot.
And that was the one the day before, yes.
Okay, that's the one I heard from Slavens, and Phil was, animated as can be, but it just seems like this team can really hit. And, I feel like I say that every single year with the team. I'm like, man, this team can really hit. But yeah, what is it now? 13 straight wins. I think that I read that's the longest
straight wins. And you look at their lineup: 1, 2, 3, 5. Their top 5 hitters are hitting over 320, and then Slavens is right there at 297. So I mean, you've got one SEC series in. I mean, it's going to change a lot when it gets to the SEC and you face those SEC pitchers. But I mean, for them to be playing the way they've been playing, you're used to the home run, you're used to the power. But I tell you what, the way Diggs has been hitting, he's hitting 344. Hosenberger's hitting 346. Wagner's hitting 384. And Bo Rofin is hitting 406 with a 734 slugging, and Wagner's 808 on the slugging.
And I've been hearing that the team, I keep on having to say I've been hearing because I haven't gotten to watch them a ton, but I hear they're really hitting well with 2 outs this year, which any team that's like manufacturing runs with 2 outs, that's such a big deal because you're not only, of course, adding on to either a lead or digging into deficit, but that is just so devastating for the other team. And this team has a lot
of guys pitch to them too. I mean, I'm looking at the top 4 guys. You got 13 walks, 19 walks, 13 walks, and 14 walks. That's just their top 4 guys. So they're making them pitch to them. And you talk about dangerous. You're talking about hitting with, 2 outs. You get comfortable as a pitcher thinking, well, I got this guy on a 1-2 count. I've got the edge, but not so fast with this team because they're going to make you pitch them. They're going to make you pitch those strikes opposed to I'm going to make them swing and miss at, I don't know. They are striking out. They have struck out more than they've walked. At 144, they've had 144 strikeouts. But I don't know how much of that was earlier in the season. Like I said, I'm like you. I haven't really been able to really hone in on the baseball because with everything going on with basketball and stuff like that. But starting on, I want to say Thursday, we're really going to start breaking down these SEC series.
Yeah, and it seems like, from the first weekend, you can only put so much stock into the first weekend of any sport, your first conference weekend, because there's teams that start off slow and finish off so strong. But Arkansas, after weekend 1, is the only 3-0 team in the West. Ole Miss went 0-3. State went 0-3. So it just seems like there's a little bit of a changing landscape, maybe. But as always, the SEC is loaded in baseball and softball. And, these early season series of it, you look back at the end of the year and every series is huge, in the standings. You'll end up the year, there's always a team that was 1 or 2 games away from, if I had to won these, we'd be sitting in a totally different spot. So to get a sweep in the opening week is something, that doesn't change the rest of the year. You have those 3 wins and you never know how Auburn's going to finish. They might finish upper 2 or 3 in the league. And that,
you never know. Yeah.
So getting an opening weekend sweep is huge.
What's that?
I said just opening weekend sweep is always huge.
Well, they got the Tuesday game against Southeast Missouri State, and then they go to Baton Rouge. So you're talking about how, yes, this is the first weekend, but it's very important that you got this sweep because you never know about these road series.
That's a huge series.
These home series and getting those sweeps. And with the looming April, April 14th, 15th, and 16th, you got Tennessee coming to town. So, that's been marked on the calendar. I mean, they got Woo Pig Weekend that weekend. So, I mean, they've got it striped and circled on everybody's calendar.
I was looking at baseball and softball SEC schedule side by side because you don't ever play all teams in the conference just with the nature of a baseball schedule. And both of those teams, I'm like, it's like every series is huge this year.
Mm-hmm.
This the way it felt. They're like, I mean, this is just an indicator where the conference is at too. But almost every weekend is you're playing a top 20 team. It feels like in baseball that LSU series. I mean, from my perspective, just seems really huge for your second week. That's one that you could have end of the year determining a division.
Well, and it's always tough playing down in Baton Rouge in any, basketball, football, and baseball. So yeah, it's going to be a tough one, but definitely great start to the weekend. Great start to the weekend for Razorback in general, and for Nico Davis to have that moment. I mean, that's what I'm saying. That's one of those moments that will go down. I think everybody will remember that moment and how he was after that game.
Yeah, I think that he's got another year after this year, and who knows what's going to happen next year. But I think that interview after the game on CBS is probably the moment that you look back on his career, and that's the people. And it was just crazy because after the season he's had with dealing with a lot of people, there's just a lot of voices these days coming from every direction, and just what all he's had to deal through this year. And that big moment and the emotion you saw, I think that's the moment that a lot of Razorback fans will remember him for. Was
and I
team to a huge upset.
Critics.
Yeah.
And I will say this, and this, I know we give critics a lot of crap and stuff, but I had when we put the post out, we had a lot of interactions with it, but I had a lot of people being like, "Look, I was one of those people." The ownership of I was one of those people, but he gained my respect and I shouldn't have doubted him, or I was one of the ones that was hard on him. And I feel horrible for being that way because this guy means everything to Arkansas and he puts Arkansas on his back. So not only did he quiet the critics, but he gained and regained a lot of respect from those people.
Yeah. And I think that like we said, it was a kind of a career defining game. Like as far as this guy's proven that the moment is not too big for him in March. Like it's just he's gonna step up. Yeah, he's built for it. And so I think that it was great to see not only that happen just in general for a Razorback player, but I mean this is a guy who's, like you said, in state from Jacksonville, from kind of the heart of the state where you've got so many Central Arkansas fans, and there's a lot of. At least I'm from Hot Springs, and I think that part of the state sometimes has more passionate. I think people from up here sometimes take it for granted just being so close to the university and be able to catch games. The people back home for him, I just can't imagine the people from Jacksonville High School watching him have that moment, just how much that probably meant to them. And I mean, he can go anywhere in Jacksonville for the rest of his life, or anywhere in the state for that matter. But let's be real. But anywhere in Central Arkansas, I mean, that guy's a hero right now, and especially just coming from there. And I think that it's one of those deals where it's the rest of his career could honestly go whatever way it wants, but he's kind of defined a legacy.
Well, Ethan, we'll wrap it up on this, man. I really enjoyed you coming on the show, and you're doing your freelance work, which was crazy how, our good friend Paul Boyd, kind of had some stuff going on. You kind of stepped in his role and you were thrown to the fire last year, but been doing freelance stuff for Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Now you've been doing so for Hogs Sports. So really tell our audience where you can find your work, and definitely been pushing everybody to follow you and follow your articles.
Yeah, well, first of all, if you're a subscriber to the Arkansas Democrat Gazette on your iPad, you'll see my work almost every morning. It feels like I'm writing something every day now with just what all is going on. Like you said, it's crazy, just kind of with what happened, which I think Paul's making a great recovery right now, from what I hear. So that's really exciting. I feel like ever since, that situation went down, like I've just been kind of, like you said, thrown in the fire. But you can find my work in the daily newspaper, and it all goes online too. And anytime I cover the University of Arkansas, any sports that goes on the whole Hog. It's part of the Democrat Gazette. So it's just, the site dedicated to Arkansas athletics. So my work gets put on there. I'll write a little roundup about softball that you can read tomorrow.
There you
As
go.
soon as I get off here. So, yeah. But aside from that, yeah, just really appreciate you always encouraging people to read my stuff. Like you said, I got thrown into it, and I had to rely on you. And I mean, I've texted Paul a lot to just kind of learn a lot of these things about the programs that I didn't know, and get a lot of insight that I'm just really appreciative of what all you've done for me. You've given me so much insight into the team and things I wouldn't have known otherwise. So yeah, I'm really excited to.
Look, you work your ass off to do what you've done. So I mean, we see when people come up and they really put in the work. So I mean, and especially with the situation, you were a mentor under Paul. So I mean, Paul's my guy, so I'm going to take care of his guy. So I kind of took you under my wing, showed you the ropes and stuff, and introduced you to the amazing SIDs that we have at Arkansas, and they make our job so much easier with Kylie and Grace and Fuller, all the SIDs, and Victoria, the ones we get to deal with, and Emily. I mean, they make our job so much easier, and I really, really enjoy working with all of them.
Yeah, it was crazy for me I felt really last year, kind of like you said, getting thrown in the fire. I got one day, I wasn't really covering Arkansas softball. I covered maybe a game or two earlier in the year. But, I mean, it was Paul's. I mean, from that, it was just with the basketball overlap. And then one day I'm sitting at, I think it was a Rogers and maybe Rogers Heritage girls soccer game. The next day I'm sitting in a press box watching the Razorback softball team win SEC championships and covering it.
Yep.
And I really appreciate, like you said, the SIDs. Grace she also got thrown into the fire because she stepped in like the day their season started or something.
Well, they had just got back from Mexico. And then she started.
Yeah.
Then, that was, yeah. So you think about, how an SID works. So you come right in after Mexico. They have the Whoopig Classic. They have the Razorback Invitational. And then they had the Easton Invitational. They had 3 back-to-back where you're playing 6, 7, 8, 9 games a weekend. And not only having to cover the Arkansas games, but you're there for the other teams too. So she got a crash course in what it was like to be an SID.
And shout out to Coach Deifel as well, because I'm sure that in my first week or so covering that, you can't make it to every game up there. And so there were some nights that it was just me asking these post game. I'm like, I'm sure I asked you some of the dumbest questions. Because, I had to learn this. Yeah. I knew, of course, know the very, the framework of the sport. But, I'm learning that things aren't called the same thing that they're called in baseball and whatnot. And so I'm sure I asked Coach Deifel some of the dumbest questions she's ever received. And just the way that she answered and has always been courteous to me. And I let her know on day one. I said, I think my introduction to her was like, I'm sorry you were getting the dollar store version of Paul Boyd for the rest of the year, probably. But I'm going to try my best. And the moment I said that, she was just helpful as can be. She was explaining the game to me, and I was like, wow, this is so. It's been nothing but great to work with y'all in the softball area.
That's been good.
Yeah.
Well, hey, man, I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow at the basketball game. They take on Stephen F. Austin tomorrow night at 7 o'clock inside Bud Walton Arena. Come on out. I think they said kids get in free. Adult tickets are $3. So let's pack the gym and be able to support this team. I know they didn't make the NCAA tournament, but, hey, let's get in and really fill up Bud Walton Arena tomorrow night and support the team the best we can. So,
they want to win it all.
Yes,
they want to win it all. Yeah.
But that will do it for this episode of the Hog Talk podcast. For Ethan Westerman, again, thank you so much for hopping in. I'm Porter Hayes, and we will catch you on Tuesday to recap the softball series and hopefully another Razorback win tomorrow night against Stephen F. Austin.